The truth behind Tsai Ing-wen's thesis is gradually coming to light. Conspirators at schools in London seem ready to come out with the truth. On September 3, 2021, the UK's Information Commissioner's Office made a key ruling ordering the University of London to provide files from 2 different categories within 35 days. The first category pertains to the school's records documenting its efforts to find Tsai's thesis. The second category includes any correspondence between LSE and the University of London that led to the posting of the website statement from October 8, 2019. With many watching Freedom of Information Act inquiries related to ThesisGate, University of London Governance Officer Emily Brigg published the files it gave to the ICO on whatdotheyknow.com. Last episode, we took a close look at the emails Brigg published. It turned out that both LSE and the University of London were well aware that Tsai Ing-wen's thesis couldn't be found back in 2011. The emails showed one librarian's efforts to find out where the thesis went. That librarian went so far as to speculate that Tsai's thesis had been queried, since nothing else of that nature had ever happened to another thesis at the school. Unfortunately, the librarian's efforts to find out what happened was cut short by the school's Research Degrees Examination Department. The department said that Tsai's files could be found in the school's archives, and that it's possible a copy of Tsai's thesis was sent to the library in 1984. However, the examiner's copy of Tsai's thesis was never returned. This story from the examination department made it seem like 3 copies of Tsai's thesis existed in 1984. Another set of emails from 2015 from the University of London's transcript office said that information on Tsai's doctorate can't be found because a higher degree office that would have overseen such documents no longer existed. The only thing Tsai's transcript could do was attest to whether a degree had been awarded or not. Here's the strange thing. The transcript office didn't say anything in 2011 when correspondence about Tsai's thesis first surfaced. At that point, the school could only use archival files to create the illusion that Tsai had a thesis. Did the transcript office lose Tsai's files in 2011? How did information about Tsai's PhD go from the school's archives to the transcript office in 2015? The University of London's cover for Tsai is crumbling with every passing moment. Everything mentioned above was discussed in our last episode. Even in 2022, however, the transcript office does not dare publicly validate Tsai Ing-wen's degree because they cannot provide any supporting documentation. The University of London can only use its February 3, 2022 statement on missing thesis to provide any reliable cover for Tsai. This week, we will take a deeper look at Emily Brigg's files and continue to expose how the University of London continues its cover-up. First, we must look into why Emily Brigg would so willingly provide the University of London's files to whatdotheknow.com. Those of you who have followed ThesisGate since the beginning will know that over the past 2 years, before it decided to make its statement, the University of London stayed quiet about Tsai's degree. School officials would tell investigators that their inquiries were vexatious and would even block certain accounts on the pretense of harassment. So, Brigg's sudden willingness to provide 5 PDF files on whatdotheknow.com comes off as very strange and unexpected. Brigg even said, To answer your request from September 19th, 2021, the University of London doesn't publish all FOIA responses publicly as a rule, but we can release to you the information that we provided previously upon the ICO's decision notice of September 3rd, 2021. So, if Brick had no obligation to publish the given information to whatdotheknow.com, why did she do so? Last episode, we discussed the possibility that Emily Brick carefully selected what she published to cover for Tsai Ing-wen. The first email in a published email chain was not included, making it very possible that the information had been intentionally concealed. The 2011 email chain told a simple story. It started with a staff member not being able to find Tsai's thesis. By the end of it, another administrator claimed that they found Tsai's records in the school's archives and had files on 3 copies of her thesis. Though it didn't make sense, this is where the story ended. Brick's job, of course, was to shape public opinion. How? The UK's freedom of information mechanisms are divided into 3 levels. WhatDoTheyKnow.com is the lowest level. Anyone can pose questions on that website, and the questioned institution can choose to respond. At this level, the University of London can essentially say whatever it wants. They could even call inquiries vexatious if they wanted to. The school has little obligation to respond to people's questions, and the risk here is low. For example, former University of London Data Protection and Information Compliance Manager Kit Good often said on whatdotheknow.com that LSE's website statement is true. When it came to answering questions about the legitimacy of Tsai's degree, Good did not provide any definite answers or proof. However, when whatdotheknow.com fails, inquirers can go to the second level of the UK's FOIA mechanism, which is requesting an ICO ruling. The ICO acts as an arbitrator between the original inquirer and the institution they are questioning. The ICO comes to a decision regarding the validity of the applicant's request and will make a ruling accordingly. Of course, the ICO's ruling holds a certain degree of legal weight. That's why, in its ruling on September 3rd, 2021, the ICO told the University of London that failure to comply with its ruling will be seen as non-compliance with a court order. If an applicant is still dissatisfied with the ICO's ruling, they can move to the next level, which is taking their concerns to the tribunal court. At that point, the dispute will not be between the original applicant and the institution they want to question, but rather the applicant and the ICO. So the original person to get the September 3rd, 2021 ruling from the ICO obviously was unhappy with the University of London's answers on whatdotheknow.com and turned to the ICO. So if the University of London already refused to publish the information on whatdotheknow.com, only to have the ICO enforce a ruling, why would Brick suddenly turn around and provide the information willingly on whatdotheknow.com on February 23rd, 2022? First, Brick provided information on the website willingly. She didn't do so at the behest of the ICO. That meant Brick, or rather the University of London, was free to publish whatever they wanted. If the ICO didn't order it, then the University of London could distort it. Were the files that Brick uploaded to whatdotheknow.com really exactly the same as the ones that the ICO ruling requested? Second, the University of London never wanted to publish the files Brick uploaded. Charles Lin began requesting the files on September 19, 2021, and kept asking until February 17, 2022. It wasn't until a Mr. Chang threatened to go to the ICO that Brick decided to comply with Lin's request. Third, if someone went to the ICO to get the University of London to upload the files, then the school wouldn't have as much flexibility to play with the information it had on hand. If it came down to an ICO ruling compelling the University of London to publish the files, then the school would have been bound by a legal court order. We can boldly assume that the files the University of London gave in compliance with the ICO's September 3rd, 2021 ruling and the ones provided on whatdotheyknow.com are not the same. We will continue to try to find the original person that evoked the ICO ruling and compare what they have with what the school gave on the website. We encourage all of our investigators to continue asking questions on whatdotheyknow.com. People who are willing can lodge protests with the ICO and force the University of London to keep divulging information. Every new piece of evidence will aid us in our court battles against the University of London. Last episode, we talked about how an LSE librarian initiated another chain of emails on June 24, 2015, searching for Tsai Ing-wen's thesis because someone had asked them for it. Correspondence revealed that back then Tsai's thesis was not in the British Library's ethos database. Then the University of London threw the ball to its transcripts office. The transcript office said that in-depth information about Tsai Ing-wen's degree would have been kept at a higher degree office, which no longer exists. The transcript office failed to give an official department name, only calling it a higher degree office. The transcript office then said that it can only confirm that the school awarded Tsai a degree. They then referred the email chain to a person whose identity was redacted. Last episode, we posed many vital questions. First, if what the transcript office says is true, does that mean all records for students before a certain year have been lost since the higher degree office no longer exists? If that's the case, how many people were affected by the office's closure? Second, the transcript office says that it can only confirm that the school awarded Tsai a degree, but it also couldn't name people who knew more about the degree awarded. Is Tsai the only person whose degree status exists under such extraordinary circumstances? Third, how can the transcript office confirm Tsai's degree if it does not have relevant records to back that information up? Even stranger than the transcript office passing the buck to a higher degree office is this. There seems to be a University of London administrator whose job it is to handle inquiries about Tsai Ing-wen. On June 24, 2015, 3:51 p.m., the LSE librarian wrote to them saying they were trying to ascertain why this thesis was not distributed to the Senate House Library, British Library, or LSE Library. The ICO needs to disclose the identity of this administrator. Their identity is vital to ThesisGate, but the information has unfortunately been redacted. 5 days later, on June 29, 2015, at 3:13 p.m., they responded to the initial email with the following. My colleague has now retrieved the file on this student from our archive storage. From this, I can see the history of chasing for copies of the thesis, both by the Research Degrees Examinations Office at Senate House and enquiries from Senate House Library 2. In 2011, the Senate House Library confirmed that it sent a copy of the thesis to the Institute for Advanced Legal Studies. At that time, blank established that IALS no longer had a copy of said thesis. The Research Degree Examinations Office had also chased both examiners appointed for the PD examination and the supervisor blank for the return of the copies of the thesis. Apparently, the internal examiner left his copy of the PhD thesis with blank post viva. Blank left both copies with the LSE, asking the LSE to return these to Senate House. These were never received. The copy referred to above, which went over to IALS, would have been the spare third copy submitted to the Research Degree Examinations Office for examination on 15th June 1983. I'm sorry I couldn't be more helpful. The person writing this email deliberately muddles many facts. If someone at the University of London is working for Tsai, this email was most certainly written by that person. Why? First, this mysterious person unearthed Tsai Ing-wen's information once again from mysterious archives. This exactly mirrors how the 2011 thesis investigation played out. Tsai's lawyer Lian Yuanlong also sourced much of his evidence during the 2019 court proceedings from shadowy archives. Archives are very important places for Tsai, because an endless amount of information can be sourced from them. After all, things that come out of storage have to be legitimate, right? However, both LSE and the University of London have said that student records wouldn't be kept in their respective archives. Second, this mysterious respondent also alludes to the 2011 thesis smuggling incident, which was outlined in Dr. Huan Xilin's own independent report. This email just proves the University of London has records of that incident as well. Strangely, at the end of the email, the writer says that the thesis sent to IALS is the one from June 15, 1983. If that's the case, why didn't the writer just say so outright instead of spinning an overly complex and convoluted story? It's like they're trying to confuse readers about the actual whereabouts of a physical thesis. Don't forget, this mystery writer got their information from the same place the Research Degree Examinations Office got theirs in 2011, archives. The University of London's explanation in 2011 was this. After giving Tsai her degree in February 1984, authorities would have sent a green record form and a reproduction of thesis form along with Tsai's thesis to the school library. In all its correspondence with ThesisGate investigators, the Senate House Library never once referred to such a process. The claims of the Research Degree Examinations Office were never substantiated by Senate House Library. Furthermore, one process talks about what happens to a completed thesis before passing a viva. The other talks about how theses are stored and preserved after a degree is conferred. The two matters are completely separate. The mystery email writer gives us all new information. They said that Tsai submitted her thesis on June 15, 1983. This is the first time that particular date has surfaced in ThesisGate investigations. Furthermore, the email tries to convince people that the thesis that was smuggled in 2011 was a thesis from 1983. Third, records from 2011 clearly established that administrators followed up with examiners and Tsai's supervisor for 1.5 years after her viva, but there were no records of the work's return. But then this person from 2015 accounts for 2 physical copies of the thesis at LSE. Where did this information come from if not out of thin air? As it turns out, the LSE librarian was successfully bamboozled by the person that responded to them. They said that they realized that the supervisor and examiners left 2 copies of Tsai's thesis at LSE, but these were never sent to the Senate House Library. One was sent from Senate House Library to IALS, but that can no longer be found. They also wanted to figure out who took the thesis and why no one followed up regarding its disappearance. Someone was spreading misinformation about Tsai's thesis at a time when the school was trying to gain some clarity. The person who wrote the email response to the LSE librarian is a key person of interest in this cover-up. They single-handedly changed LSE and University of London's understanding about Tsai's thesis. We can now draw the following conclusions. In 2011, the first explanation was that after awarding Tsai her degree in 1984, the school followed up with her supervisor and examiners for 1.5 years to track down her thesis, but no records indicate what came of these efforts. In 2015, that story turned into the supervisors and examiners left their copies of the thesis at LSE, but no one sent it to Senate House Library. Second, according to the 2011 email, a 3rd copy of Tsai's thesis would have been sent to the Senate House Library along with 2 forms. However, the library does not have records of receiving the thesis. However, in 2015, the story was that the thesis was sent from Senate House Library to Institute of Advanced Legal Studies, and nobody knows what became of the thesis after that. The wrongdoers are constantly rewriting history. Even if the information from 2011 was false, they still managed to change the story about Tsai Ing-wen's thesis. And so, in 2015, the LSE librarian's quest for the truth came to an end. On July 2nd, 2015, at 5:03 a.m., LSE Law School received a letter from Asia. The writer was also looking for Tsai Ing-wen's thesis. That person clearly came prepared. I was told that I am supposed to find her dissertation in the catalog system of the LSE library, but I had failed to find it in the system. I had contacted the collection office of the LSE library and the LSE archivist a couple weeks ago, but both of them do not have this PhD dissertation at all, and I have no idea if they ever had it before. So it seems that the LSE Law Department is the only place that has a copy of this dissertation. Therefore, it would be kind of you to help me find it. This person goes on to say, in addition, I was told that the US database company ProQuest might have one copy of the dissertation I am looking for, so I am wondering if you can answer me the following questions. Did your department or the author of that dissertation ever authorize ProQuest to have your graduates' PhD dissertation before? The reason I ask this is because I do not want to be another victim of a commercial strategy. I am not saying that ProQuest might be a fraud or something. My point is, it is unreasonable for me to expect ProQuest to have the dissertation I am looking for, since I cannot find that dissertation in both the LSE library and the LSE archive office. It could just be another data entry mistake. The writer seems to hint that the ProQuest entry for Tsai's thesis is completely fabricated. Despite this email's rigorous circulation throughout LSE, not one person could answer the questions in this letter. In the end, school officials even recommend against responding to it. This email from Asia received the following response. I believe you are aware of the interest in the thesis of Dr. Tsai. I think it important that the university and the LSE agree on an approach on who answers questions on what. There have been 5 or 6 requests for copies of the thesis. The interest arises because Dr. Tsai is the Democratic Progressive Party's candidate for the Taiwan presidential election in 2016. I have asked my colleagues to retrieve Dr. Tsai's file from our archive. From what I have seen so far, there is no doubt that the degree award is valid. There may be features of the process which reflect the academic habits of the mid-1980s and would be frowned upon today, but we have issued to whom it may concerns confirming the degree in the past, and based on the evidence available to me at present, I see no reason why we shouldn't do so now. The main mystery is why the copies of the thesis cannot be found. It is clear that people at your end and at the LSE end have looked in all the obvious places and in some which aren't obvious but still cannot find them. My understanding is that the position seems to be that 2 copies were left with LSE from the supervisor and the internal examiner, but that these were never passed on to Senate House Library, and that 1 copy went from Senate House Library to the Institute of Advanced Legal Studies, but can no longer be found. I have also had a message from a blank asking a range of questions about the examination process as follows. Dr. Tsai's PhD program year. How many years did Dr. Tsai spend in the program? Dr. Tsai's oral defense date. Dr. Tsai's oral defense committee chair and members. Dr. Tsai's thesis committee chair and members. Dr. Tsai's thesis bonded date. Dr. Tsai's diploma date, and the signing professor or academic personnel. I have replied that under UK data protection law, I am unable to release the information you have asked for without Dr. Tsai's permission. Never has it been more clear that ThesisGate is an international issue. Tsai's thesis has gone from non-existent to having its whereabouts unknown, to now authorities accounting for 2 copies. Now, the school is trying to play fast and loose with disclosing information behind privacy laws. Tsai's team has even resorted to a ploy to get a reissued diploma from 2015 as if she legitimately got her degree. The story at hand might look complex, but it really isn't. Let's go back to 2011 when LSE and the University of London were looking into Tsai's thesis. All of the school's information on Tsai came from school archives. The school had no idea what was going on until someone went to the archives to pull out information. However, where did that information come from? It may have led to an extensive review to unfurl Tsai's degree, but why was that information in the archives in the first place and nowhere else? Who was the one that told Tsai her thesis was missing when she went to LSE on June 7, 2011? The school couldn't have known. Concealed information and events can always be dug up. Next episode, we will unravel the story further. We will look into the ProQuest database entry and what role it plays in ThesisGate. Then we'll dive into where the publication date June 15, 1983 for Tsai's thesis came from and how it relates to the IALS legal research database. Then we'll dive into the second category of Emily Briggs files. We'll see you then.